Well, this is a beautiful afternoon in Madison. I'm Cata Bailin, Faculty Director of LACIS, Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies Program, and have enormous pleasure to welcome you today to our habitual Tuesday lunchtime lecture series, today focused on Colombian novels of 21st century and imagined identity. I have a great honor and pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Beatriz Lucia Botero, who teaches here at University of Wisconsin-Madison in Integrated Liberal Studies program and holds 2 PhDs. The first one in literary theory and psychoanalysis from la Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, and the second one from here in UW in Latin American Studies, where some 20 years ago, we met in one of my classes, myself being a beginning assistant professor and Beatriz pursuing her second PhD. Well, today, Beatriz is an accomplished writer. Her work always focusing on psychoanalysis, identity, body, violence, and social conflict. And she's an author of 2 books. The first one is an edited volume titled Women in Contemporary Latin American Novels, Psychoanalysis and Gendered Violence, published in 2018. And I proudly hold in my hands the second one, whose title is the title of today's talk. Imagined Identity, Colombian Novels of 21st Century. So congratulations, Beatriz, for this book. This is probably going to be one of the first presentations, and welcome to our lunchtime series.
Thank you, Cata. I have so many people who I have to thank, like Cata Bailin, Alberto Vargas from LACI, but all the people who was part of this time where you write a book, you need a lot of time writing, so a lot of people with conversations, and so that is part of the book. So I want to say thank you to LACIS for all the support and all the people who are here. Some people I haven't seen for a lot of time, so I'm very happy to see all the people here. So let's start. So I'm going to start my presentation here. So today I'm going to talk about this book that was, the first manuscript was my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation. So now it's a reality, it's a book. So this is the cover. And what I'm doing here is I am trying to put together the concept of national identity with the concept of personal identity, how we construct both. And we know that this is in a permanent adjustment, and we just need to understand a little bit what is that. So in the book, I am analyzing 6 novels. And from that analysis, I will conclude some ideas about the national identity. The novels are Memoria de mis putas tristes by Gabriel García Márquez, El esquimal y la mariposa by Naum Montt, Delirio by Laura Restrepo, Melodrama by Jorge Franco, Angosta by Héctor Abad Faciolince, y Cobro de Sangre by Mario Mendoza. I'm going to talk a little bit about the covers because I am really a visual person, and I really want to know what is happening behind the covers. So this is Gabriel García Márquez's latest novel. He was stopping writing novels 10 years, and then he appeared with this novel in 2004, and that was the last novel. As you can see in the cover is himself, just giving the back, kind of saying goodbye, this is my last novel, my last memory, and this is the last example of literature, art, and life. And he put all these together, and the things that he said is regarding Colombia, but also regarding the human being as a good writer should be. El Esquimal y la Mariposa by Nahum Mott. He won the National Prize of Novel in 2004. Delirium by Lara Restrepo. With this book, she received the Premio Alfaguara Prize, which is an important literary prize in Latin America literary world. I really like the cover and the way that the fish and the water and this idea that the relationship between men and women sometimes are permeated by the crazy woman, right? And how she disposed her analysis in her crazy mind in order to understand what is happening. This is Melodrama, and I want to talk, this is the first cover, as you see here, and it was done by Carlos Duque, the same designer of Galan, which is one of the presidents, the candidate of president that we had in 1981. And he was the same, and he was trying to replicate the concept of La Pietà by Miguel Angelo. And Alfaguara, then he published the book and with another kind of cover. This is Angosta by Héctor Abad Faciolince. The first one is the first cover, and little by little he was changing, the book was changing the cover. But these Salto de Tequendama Falls are very, they have a very good relationship with Bogota City. So if you go to Bogota, please go to the Salto de Tequendama Falls. It's not very high, but it's linked with a lot of stories, especially beginning of 20th century in Colombia. So he was trying to show what is this city of Bogota. And Cobro de Sangre by Mario Mendoza. And I'm going to talk about this example later. I want to show you as well the index, because in the index you can see what is basically the book. So the first chapter is about context, what is happening, and I put a lot of attention from the third stage, from 1985, because I think that year was we had an important events like the Palacio de Justicia took by M19 guerrilla group, and the volcanoes, the Nevado del Ruiz, sepultated, delete an entire city, Armero, and what is happening around that. The second chapter is more about the character itself, how the novel is showing the character and how the character move around the novel and the city and the violence problem. And the third one is about identity, how we construct identity as a national concept, right? The term identity simultaneously enunciates the identical and the unique, and comes from Latin America root idem, which means equal, being identical to something. But also when we speak of identity, we refer to the most personal, that which is the innermost innate, what Stephen Lowell has called the uniqueness. And this concept of uniqueness is what we are trying to find behind the concept of identity. Who are you? You have to show how unique you are, how different you are from the others in order to present yourself as a human being, as an identity, right? Other concept that I use in my book is the concept of Sigmund Freud, the ego. And for Sigmund Freud, he said that the child must develop her ego or his ego because we don't born with it. For others, like Melanie Klein and other psychoanalysts, they say that sure, we have ego from the beginning. We just need to modify meanwhile we grow up. But for Sigmund Freud, no. He thought that we need to develop this idea of ego. And just to remind you, the ego is this middle entity who are in between the id, means the pleasure, principle of pleasure, and the unconscious, and the superego, which is the father, the law, the limit. And the ego is all the time trying to balancing these two entities inside of ourselves. So the ego is what we will call the personality, but also is more than that, because it's all of these forces, drives, I will call it, the eros and the thanatos drive, who are fighting for the ego attention. And basically in the book, what I say is that we are narratives. And Anthony Giddens, he said that a person's identity is not given, nor simply dependent on the reactions of others, but consists in the capacity of keep a particular narrative going, understanding where the person comes from and where she or he is headed is the major issue of self-development. And this particular narrative is what I want to put emphasis on, because of course we are narratives. We talk about ourselves. When someone asks, who are you can say only your name, but also you can say your uniqueness, way of seeing the world, but also your characteristic. I am a vegetarian, and this is kind of your narrative. The more that you talk about your narrative, the more that you present how vegetarian you are, the more that you get fixed in this idea that you are vegetarian, right? So we know how important and all the weight that the words have. If you start saying things, that things are going to shape your way of seeing the world. And this is when I say that this particular narrative is, you have your narrative. And perhaps your narrative is not the same narrative that your parents have about you or your partner have about you. You shape your way, but you also have a narrative about the way that you present yourself in front of the world. Other concept that I use is the concept of identification. So the identification of the child is related to psychological process by which he or she assimilates one aspect, a property, or an attribute of another. That becomes partially or totally his or her model. Because personality is built and differentiates through a series of identification. Thus, identity needs identification to be able to perform. And also literature needs identification. So what is identification? You feel that this aspect is related to your own idea of yourself, and you just get attached to that. It's like when you know someone and you say, well, I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and the other person say, oh, me too. That's a moment of identification when you see that this person is near to your own narrative of yourself. And of course, when you are reading a book or you are watching a movie, you tend to do identification with the main characters. This is why we want the bad people to get killed and the good people, which are typically the person that you get identified with, to get to win this idea. So we all the time are trying to put ourselves, our identity, in constant relationship with the identification that we do with other person. So we all the time are trying to do this analysis with the other. Other element that I work with, because it's the way that you do the concept of identity, is the ideal ego and ego ideal. These are concepts that came from psychoanalysis too. What the parents expect of the child, this is the ideal ego. What the child wants for himself or herself is the ego ideals. are concepts that are closely linked to the social model that parents try to convey to the children as they grow. So just imagine you have your own idea of what you want to be. You want to be a doctor, and probably your parents and the society that you are, they really want you to be a doctor, and that's okay. But what if I want to be a drug dealer and be a millionaire? So probably your parents will say, well, if you share the money with me, it's okay. No, they will say, no, you cannot do that. You are a good person. And the society and the ego ideal and the ideal ego will be in conflict in that moment, because the society wants something that you don't want, or you want something that the society doesn't. So that's a other concept that we use when we create this concept of identity. We play with all of these elements: the other, the outside, the inside, the idea of myself that I identify with, and the idea that my family, my parents, my society wants me to be. So all of these elements play a role in this. Language and name is important because we must understand that what we call identity consists of personal identity, what we think of ourselves, body, face, and name, the language. From the perspective of the other, this is what you see and how you name it. So the first thing that you will see is who you are. I am this person, this is my name, this is my body, this is my shape. And you will recognize that. We can play with those elements like a plastic surgery, for instance. They will change your face, or you will do certain kind of exercise and your body will change. And the language, the tone that you speak, the words that you use, all of these are together in one being, I will say. So there are three conditions that shared by the novels. One is the incorporation of the country's political history. So all of these novels talks about what happened in history. All of these novels talks about the job of writing. There is a writer in the novel, or there is someone who is writing in the novel. And yes, we can trace the idea of writing in the history of literature. We can go to 1867 with La Maria, or we can go to they write letters, or to 1924 with La Voragine, when the protagonist is writing about what is happening. But the novels that we see right now, they really incorporate this idea of writing, of a writer inside of the novel. And the third idea is a permanent manifestation of duplicity and unfolded identities as a formula for adaptation to the political and personal history. So all of these novels, the main character, it has another double, or the main character say, I am not me anymore, I am other. It's kind of this split of conscience will give them the possibility of being alive, because it's kind of a dead of life situation. So because of these three elements, I'm going to choose one novel, and I'm going to show you the way that this novel will show these three conditions. Just remind you that all of these novels have the same, but in different ways. So I'm going to talk about COBRO de Sangre by Mario Mendoza then. Cobro de Sangre, Mario Mendoza, the previous novel of Cobro de Sangre was Satanás, and he won the Alfaguara Literary Prize for that novel. Cobro de Sangre was published in 2004, and the title is referring to a term from the Wayús people, indigenous group in the north of Colombia, term that implicates the Italian law, an eye for an eye. right? And you can see that this idea that if you kill someone of my family, I will must kill someone of your family is something that is embedded in this novel and history. History, the second element that is shared in all the novels. History, well, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, then Colombian Minister of Justice, was assassinated in April 30, 1984. Lara Bonilla has been characterized as one of the few politicians willing to openly denounce Colombian drug trafficking at the time. August 18, 1989, presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán was assassinated during an electoral rally on the orders of Pablo Escobar. March 22, 1990, Bernardo Jaramillo Osa, presidential candidate representing the Patriotic Union Party, was killed. April 26, 1919, Carlos Pizarro, another presidential candidate, was also assassinated. These four Colombian politicians were secondary characters in Cobro de Sangre, also in other novels that I work in this book. The second element is the writing, right? With regard to writing, Mendoza's protagonist traversed the city in order to capture its essence in a novel he begins but never finished, titled Están Hablando, they are talking. However, he is frustrated novelist who realized that writing isn't enough to capture his urban adventure. So he was a writer, he was writing in his apartment and he was putting papers all over the apartment while he was walking around. And that's part of the novel, this metafiction, right? It's someone who is talking about literature and he's talking about literature in general. So identity, the third element that I'm going to talk is identity can be understood in terms of duplicity. In Cobro de Sangre, Samuel Sotomayor, who is the main character, he joined a guerrilla rebellion group but transforms into Efraín Espitia, a literature professor, in an attempt to save his own life. Shortly after, the police capture Espitia and sentence him to a lengthy prison sentence. Naturally, he falls into a state of depression, sinking down into the depths of himself, depths he had never explored. So there is this other element that I'm not going to talk is about how these characters walk around the city. They walk like a flaneur in the sense of Walter Benjamin, right? This walker in the city. But also in the idea of literature, Samuel came to realize that he liked Ephraim's personality more and more each time. His openness to joviality and good attitude, because Ephraim was deep and happy, lucid and full of jokes, sensible and funny. Embedded in this new identity, he devotes himself to teaching and develops a curriculum around 3 novels: Journal to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad, and 4 Years Aboard Myself by Eduardo Salamea Borda. Each work refers to travel, but even more tellingly, each work emphasizes an inward journey. So not only the characters are walking around the city, but all the manifestations of literature is like a travel inside. It's a travel that you have to recover your own monsters, your own idea of yourself, and your own idea of the world. The double. The first thing that Efraín Espitia noticed was that his body became tense, hard, as if they had injected cement into the tops of his feet. His usually self-confidence disappeared, vanished, and he didn't know at first what was happening to him. A few seconds had gone by and he recognized the symptoms and got to the drift. the return of Samuel Sotomayor. So it's this kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? This double personality, this double idea. One Efrain Espitia, very happy, professor of literature, and the other dark, going into the abyss almost. But this duplicity in the narrative is a representation of the duplicity of national discourse. And this is probably the more important point of my book, is literature is not only a reflection of writers in the history and space that they inhabit, it's also a reflection of what is happening in the national discourse. And this kind of the idea of duplicity, of the double, you see in the national discourse in Colombia. First of all, who will think Colombia, the happiest country in the world? I'm seeing this since 2004, this idea that we are one of the happiest countries in the world, according to a survey of happiness, hope, and economic optimism conducted by Gallup. The South American country accumulated 87 points, coming in behind Fiji and Philippines. And when you see this list of countries, it's kind of how come Colombia can be one of the happiest countries in the world if we are in the middle of this very violent moment. Well, not only that, but in November 2008, the 10th presidential advisor, Jose Obdulio Gaviria, dared to assure in front of the UN that Colombia had no war. The conflict is an issue that is particularly over. We have said that Colombia does not have an internal armed conflict, and then I will explain that it is a technical thing. So when the president says we do not have an internal armed conflict, he is saying that the elements with which the existence of an internal armed conflict in Colombia is defined do not exist. First, the existence of a political party in arms. Which political party in arms, he said. So you can see, first we are the happiest world in the world, then we have this double national identity, and war, problems, violence. What? We are the happiest country in the world. But not only that, let me explain you one of the latest examples, the more cynical example that we have seen in years. And this is a news that, let me introduce you first. Luisa Marina Bernal is one of the mother of Madres de Soacha, mother of Leonardo Porras. Leonardo Porras, a mentally challenged day laborer. So mentally challenged that he was unable to work properly. He was just doing random things in the neighborhood, but not more than that. So he was lured by the promise of work and flown from Bogota to a faraway location in northern Colombia, Ocaña, Santander, where he was shot to death by Colombian soldiers. As part of the nefarious scheme, prosecutors say he was then identified as a leftist terrorist killer in action in order to hide the army's body count. For each guerrillero killed, the officer was given compensation with money or vacation days. So you can imagine that this start being part of the society. So the police or the officers, they want more dead bodies because it's a lot of money for them and more vacations. So they start taking people, young people who wants to have any job and any price, and they bring them to another place. They plant arms, they plant uniforms, and they kill them, and they show them as a result of the good deeds of the February 18. I'm talking about less than 2 weeks ago. The Special Jurisdiction for Peace, la JEP, the Transitional Justice Court in charge of trying the most serious crimes committed during the armed conflict in Colombia established that between 2002 and 2008, there were more than 6,400 victims of the so-called false positives. So you can see here the double discourse, right? One thing that you see and one thing that is happening. And this is the total of victims and homicides that was committed by the force, the public force. And you can read that in El País, in the newspaper, but also in the auto number 33 from the JEP. That double narrative that we find in novels, we also see that in works of art. And this is the first work of art. This is not a work of art. This is the coat of arms of my country. You can see here the condor. This is the abundance, food, money. Is a Colombia full of things, freedom, not slavery anymore, and the Panama Canal. Bernardo Salcedo, this artist, he did that. There is no condors anymore. They have been killed. And actually, like 3 years ago, they released 5 condors to see how are they doing. I'm not sure what happened with them. There is no abundance, a lot of poverty you can see. There is no freedom, not even freedom of expression, even though you can say that in legal terms you can say whatever you want. But the truth is, a lot of activists have been killed in recent years. More than 200 people, more than 400 people. I don't have here the numbers, but it's huge. There is no canal. We give the canal in 1903, if I'm not wrong, to Panama. So we don't have that canal. So there is no coat of arms. There is no common homeland, right? And I really like you to put attention to this title, First Lesson, which is the lesson that you will learn as a kid in the school. The first lesson is, of course, the symbols of your homeland, right? Your flag, your map, and of course, the coat of arms. But the coat of arms itself is saying something that is not real. It's a double idea of that. Another artist who is doing this is a statue in Huila in the San Agustin Archaeological Park. We don't know much about this civilization who lived in Colombia. We know the dates more or less, 1000 before Christ, but we don't know much. But look at the element. It's a park full of statues. But this artist, Nadino Spina, he changed the element, and he write is an idol with school, but he's talking a little bit about this internalization, identification with United States, right? With this ideology of Mickey Mouse and the fairy tale, the perfect world, the happy world, the American dream, kind of. And the last example that I'm going to use is the Antonio Caro. The name is Colombia. So you can immediately make a connection with Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola as an element that is embedded in any culture in Latin America. And actually, you can go to the farthest part in Colombia and you will find Coca-Cola, but perhaps you don't have an aspirin. Perhaps you don't have something to stitch any wound, but you will have Coca-Cola. You will not have any person who will help you with fishing, but you will have Coca-Cola. Whatever you need, the cars of Coca-Cola are all over the country, and they will reach the entire part of the country. And that's true in all over Latin America. So when Colombia is now Coca-Cola, there is a political statement here made by Antonio Caro, the artist. And what is the future of this book? And I'm going to finish here. I'm going to finish here because I really want to have more questions about that from the public if you want. So this is a new concept that is not in the book, but I've been thinking a lot about the concept of shape. And I learned it from a Buddhist monk who talked about this idea of shape. And shape, in the way that I understand it, is more that something that is flexible, something that moves around with you. It came with your idea of yourself in the past, but also your idea of yourself in the future. What do you want for you in the future? But also this idea of shape moves, is flexible. I didn't say form, which is more attached to the physical form. I say shape because it moves and you feel it. And now that we are here in this world of internet, in this world of computer screens, we are learning how to create a shape, and we feel the shape of the other even though we are not physical together, because we are learning, I think we are learning how to feel the other. And I assure you that if we met every week, all of us together, probably we will construct a shape of ourselves, of our group. Is this idea that is beyond your body, beyond the language, beyond your past or your future, is more than that. And it talks about the relationship that you establish with your own ideas, but also with your environment. How do you move? How do you think about life? How do you, someday you feel that you are expanded, that you can sing in front of everybody and talk, and some other day you just feel that you shape, you want to be inside of your bed dreaming, right? So we move. This idea of shape is very interesting for me because you move yourself depending on the day, of the time, and we are learning how to read the shape of the others, even though that we are not physically present. And I think if we, little by little, we are learning how to read the other, how to read the expectations of the other, and how to read the identity, what we call the identity of the other. I prepared this talk short because I really want questions, and I really want to have a conversation with yourself. So thank you.